NASA reaches out to touch the sun. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is Dr. Nicola Fox, Director of the Heliophysics Division, Science Mission Directorate at NASA. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Welcome back. The last time we spoke, you were still at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab working on the Parker Solar Probe. Tell us about your new role at NASA.
Yeah, so just 3 weeks after Parker left the pad at Kennedy Space Center, I moved down to NASA headquarters. And so I'm down in Washington, D.C., and I have the privilege of leading the heliophysics division. And so Parker Solar Probe is in my portfolio as one of our big missions, but now I have a complete portfolio of missions covering everything from the inner corona with Parker Solar Probe, all the way through the solar wind to the Earth, around our magnetosphere and ionosphere. And then now our Voyagers have actually gone all the way out of our heliosphere. And so we're covering all of the spaces in between the sun to the Earth and beyond to the very edge of our solar system.
That's a lot to cover. Nikki, let's focus in. So the Parker Solar Probe launched last August. Since then, it's made a close flyby of Venus and just completed, in fact, its second close approach to the sun. Stepping back for a moment, what are the science objectives for Parker?
So there are these big questions that have really puzzled scientists for decades and decades. And, we've looked at the sun in every possible wavelength, in every different way, and we've discovered all kinds of things. We've had spacecraft that have gone in as far as Mercury, and they've, really shed a lot of light, excuse the pun, on what's going on in the solar wind. But the big mysteries still remain. So during the total solar eclipse, when you see that beautiful hazy atmosphere around the sun's corona, that hazy atmosphere is about 300 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And so we don't really understand why. There are a lot of theories as to what causes this coronal heating, but we've never had measurements from this really key region to be able to really explain that to us. The other thing that was actually predicted by Dr. Eugene Parker back in 1958, which kind of led to the excitement of this mission, is that this plasma, this sort of solar coronal material that you see there, is continuously accelerated, so much so that it moves away from the sun, bathes all of the planets, and so that's what causes space weather here at Earth, and in fact shapes our heliosphere. So it shapes our protective bubble, our solar system's bubble, as we go around in the Milky Way. And so why is this solar wind continuously accelerated? And we really have to go up into this region, this intense heat and radiation region of the corona, to really unlock these mysteries.
It's still pretty early in Parker's mission, and you're talking about what we're trying to learn and what we want to learn. How is the probe performing so far? Are we progressing in evaluating its data as we'd hoped?
Yes, she's knock on wood doing fabulously well. So we were very, very fortunate when we launched, as you mentioned, in August, our Delta IV Heavy, which you can actually see behind me, a model of it. But that put us smack down the middle of where we wanted to go with our trajectory. And so we didn't have to do quite as many maneuvers as we thought, we kind of planned for, because this Delta IV Heavy was so perfect down the range. And so we did our first flyby of the planet Venus. We use Venus to do a gravity assist. I like to say it's a little bit like a handbrake turn, because we actually use Venus to slow down a little bit and sort of fall gracefully into the sun. And so we are orbiting the sun, going very close on one side of our orbit and then out around the orbit of Venus on the other side. And so we're going to make these sort of petal-shaped orbits as we go in and out. We're going to do that 24 times. And so we've done our first flyby of Venus. We have another 6 to go in our future, in our first 7 years of our mission. And we've done 2 close flybys of the sun. So we've been within 15 million miles of the sun's surface. So, that's still incredibly close, more than twice as close as anything has been. At our top speed, right now, it's about half of our final top speed. So we're going at about 213,000 miles an hour at our closest approach. And of course, as we step closer and closer using those other 6 consecutive flybys of Venus, we'll be doing 430,000 miles an hour, which is a blistering 118 miles a second, which still blows my mind.
Totally. What is Parker's mission, or how rather does Parker's mission work in conjunction with other NASA spacecraft, and what role does it play in NASA's Living with the Star program?
And so, you know, I like to think of my fleet kind of as one big observatory with all of these little buoys in really important places. And so Parker is filling the missing gap. So we've observed the sun in all kinds of different wavelengths from remote sensing using all of our amazing telescopes. And we've got our measurements in the solar wind. Now Parker is going into this region where we've never had measurements before. And so it's really filling this mystery. It's almost the last piece of a puzzle in the sun-Earth connection. So how is what happens on the sun, how is that driving what we see here at Earth? And so how does that drive the aurora or the northern and southern lights? What does that do to spacecraft that are in orbit around the Earth? What does it do to our power grids? What does it do to our cell phone coverage, our GPS accuracy? All of this is really governed by what is coming to us from the sun. And so we have all of our little pieces, all of our spacecraft that are in these really key locations, and really enabling us to not only unlock the mysteries of the sun, but also then trace what that's doing to our planet here on Earth. And so we have this fleet. Living with a Star is one of our programs that actually focuses on not just basic science, but science and its impact to humanity. So, you know, all the technology impacts I just mentioned are sort of fall into the impacts of what the sun does to our life and society. And so, you know, Living with a Star has different spacecraft in it. Parker Solar Probe is one, Solar Dynamics Observatory is another, and that's our fabulous telescope that's looking in, you know, the highest resolution possible at the sun 24/7. And then the Van Allen probes, which are 2 tough little spacecraft that play around in the Van Allen belt. So in these regions of radiation that most spacecraft either avoid or turn off the instrumentation when they go through them, that's where they live and work. They cut through the inner belt. There are sort of 2 like donut-shaped regions of radiation in inner belt that's very high radiation, protons, nasty things. And then the outer one that's very, very dynamic, sometimes splits into 2 separate belts itself. And so it goes close in on one side, and then the 2 spacecraft kind of chase one another around these orbits in the Van Allen probes. So the Parker is now telling us what's going on in the corona. SDO is looking at the surface of the sun and telling us, well, there's a really interesting region there. Hey, Parker, what are you seeing? Parker tells us what she's seeing, and then the Van Allen probes can actually monitor what's happening in the radiation belts.
What are some of the more ambitious missions in the future for NASA?
So we have several missions that the community is very interested in that we are starting to look at the feasibility. One is everybody wants to know, you know, hey, we've gone really close to the sun in the equatorial region. So in that sort of, if you put the Earth and the sun on one plane, that's where Parker Solar Probe is moving. Now people would like to go over the poles of the sun and look at what is coming from these, we call them coronal holes. It's regions of open flux where the very, very high speed streams are coming from. And so there are a lot of people that would like us to go over the poles, which is another big technology leap that we'll need to do. And then another one is kind of going almost from the sublime to the ridiculous. We're going all the way in with Parker Solar Probe, and now there are a lot of people who would like to go all the way out with an interstellar probe. And so Voyagers, the pair of Voyagers who 40 years after their launch are still chugging along, they've both left our heliosphere, so this protective bubble. Now there are you know, a lot of people interested in how quickly could we leave the heliosphere if we sort of rocket out at great speeds, so that we can really start studying the space beyond what our sun controls. And so, we have this protective bubble, we call it the heliosphere. It kind of breathes in and out with the solar cycle. And so we see changes in the heliosphere as we are traversing around the Milky Way. It protects us from all of the interstellar space. And so what is kind of going on in interstellar space? How is that interacting with our space that's governed by our sun? And so they're two very, very big missions that are ambitious, that a lot of people would like to do. And so we're starting to look at what kind of technology would we have to develop to be able to do that.
The NASA website has a wonderful photo of you with Dr. Eugene Parker, who is the probe was named after. Dr. Parker is 91 years old.
Yes.
How exciting is it for him to be a part of the mission at this point?
So he is just amazing, and he is so modest and so lovely, and just generally excited about everything. And so, I was very fortunate. I got to stand with him at the launch, and I was indeed the first person who was able to say, "How do you feel?" And he was just terribly quiet, and he just said, "Wow, we did it. Woohoo!" It's just adorable. And then, he's just heaped praise on the people that actually built the mission. He's terribly modest about, he said to me, "Oh, all I did was write a paper." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a pretty good paper, Gene, just saying." And he said, "Yeah, but, if I got something wrong, if in that paper and, you find different results, I'll just write another paper." He said, "But, if you calculate something wrong with the mission, it's mission ending." And so he was very just appreciative of all of the thousands of people who'd made Parker Solar Probe come to life. And so he actually came with me a couple of weeks ago. We went to the Amazon Mars conference, and he was coolest +1 ever, Gene Parker. And so he was my +1. And we went to Amazon Mars, and just watching him when he saw some of the data, we had some tease data, just some of the very kind of survey, quick look data that we had coming down from the spacecraft, and I was showing it to him, and he was just like, lighting up and wanting to get into more and more of the details. And I was like, "I'm sorry, this is all I have, but stay tuned, it's coming down soon." And so he can't wait to delve into some of the science. I think he's very excited and extremely humbled to have this mission named after him.
I bet. I have to ask you, Nikki, what is it to your left that we're looking at?
Oh, to my left. Yes. So this, let me see if I can, do this without disturbing too much. So this is actually a model of the coronal magnetic field. And it's a 3D printed model. And it is actually what the coronal field was predicted to look like during the total solar eclipse in August of 2017. And if you look at the bottom there, you'll see a little white blob. That is a little tiny Parker Solar Probe, obviously not to scale, but the position of where Parker Solar Probe is in fact to scale. So that's just inside 10 solar radii, and that is where we will be at our final closest approach. And so we're very excited about that, because a lot of these coronal loops, and so you can see a lot of these very active structures that we all get very excited about, are reaching out well beyond where Parker Solar Probe will be. So it's going to be exciting.
Very exciting. Dr. Nikki Fox, Director of the Heliophysics Division, Science Mission Directorate at NASA. If somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way they can do that, Nikki?
So you can follow me on Twitter at SolarGirl2018. 2018 because, of course, we launched Parker Solar Probe in 2018. And you can find fabulous information about everything we do here at the Heliophysics Division at nasa.gov.
Thanks again for your time, Nikki. And if you guys want to find me, you can do that right at tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.